the budgeting. You see how I am nitpicking every little thing.
Never
I've
like that.
never been like that. We were in Bloomingdale's yesterday. I'm like, we have to go to H&M.
Yeah. You
Like I notice it in me now.
Can you imagine, though, like this? A person who is actually struggling and has to go to places like H&M or the dollar store to get their goods, for example. They would be furious for something like this, right? They would be like justifiably annoyed. Hello, good people. Welcome back. Today we have a interesting video, particularly for me. It is of a celebrity going on a podcast complaining about the fact that she can't go to H&M anymore. This alone didn't get me curious. It's more like the reason why people were so upset, because it's not necessarily new that celebrities go on podcasts and talk about things like everyday things that don't necessarily affect them, but it affects the regular person. So the fact that a lot of people were hating so much got me curious. So I looked into it, and it was because she made the clip in question was a contradiction to what she made or statement she made in the past. I think she went on a podcast. We're going to react to the video and then give our commentary on it. But she went on a podcast, I think with Nick Cannon, explaining her needs or her wants or elements that she would want to have in her man, and people like flamed her for it because it was so unrealistic, or like not necessarily unrealistic, but the chances of her getting that type of person is really, really low. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna react to the clip in question that is going viral right now. We're gonna look back and to compare the two, to get a full idea of what is actually going on. And after that, we're gonna look at some of the messages in there. Like, for example, this could be an act, because it's not necessarily new that celebrities would like cry on camera or say something outrageous to get attention. And look, it's working. So we're going to react to the first clip, and then we're going to go back, react to the second clip, and then we go from there.
It's just my finances. Like the budgeting. You see how I am nitpicking every little thing.
Never
I've
like that.
never been like that. We were in Bloomingdale's yesterday. I'm like, we have to go to H&M.
Yeah. You
Like I notice it in me now, just nitpicking. And it's not even, I just don't have it like to spend the liquid.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really, really skeptical whenever I see celebrities crying or like anybody crying, because I tend to believe, or maybe it's just because I've been on the internet so long, that whenever a celebrity or like a YouTuber or a very popular person is crying, I tend not to believe it, or I tend to believe that the person is just doing it for attention. But can you imagine, though, like this? A person who is actually struggling and has to go to places like H&M or the dollar store to get their goods, for example. They would be furious for something like this, right? They would be like justifiably annoyed that a person who has no idea what what the regular person or the average person has to go through every single day just to survive, and she's over here complaining about H&M. Again, it could just be an act, because she's an actor, she's a comedian, she's a performer. So it could be the case that she's just doing this just to get some form of relevance. I wouldn't be surprised that she is planning some form of event or some form of like comedic return or whatever it may be. An event, let's leave it at that, to create some buzz, to funnel some attention to that. Negative attention is more powerful than positive attention, usually, because people get more emotional, especially when it's something that is highly relatable to their circumstance. Her being a rich person, complaining about the fact that she has to go to H&M, which is not cheap, by the way. It's expensive for a regular person. And then her talking about the fact that she has to reduce the amount that she has to spend because of whatever it may be. You know, the funny thing is, this is something that a lot of people would never be able to relate to, because they don't necessarily live in her shoes. Yes, it's easier. I'm not by any means saying what she said makes sense. It is silly, because it is silly to me, because I have no idea what it's like to have that type of money. That's why it's silly to me. And I think that's why it's silly to a lot of people. So if we were able to live, or like put ourselves in her shoes, whenever you make a significant amount of money, the more money you make, the more you think about ways you could lose it. I think there's a phenomenon for this. I think I'm gonna go look it up. But the more money you make, the more afraid you are of losing it. So therefore, you try to make more to make up for that fear. So it makes sense if this is completely real and she's not faking it. Yes, her situation makes no sense for the average person, but for a person who is accustomed to living a certain type of way, it makes sense for her to react that way, or for him or whoever it may be to react that way. It's just funny to regular people because that doesn't make any sense to us. So now we're going to go look back so we can get full context as to why people are actually losing their minds over this, because I don't think this is the origin. This is the only reason why people are crazy about this. Kim Kardashian going on, like, let's say, a podcast talking about work, get off your ass and work, doesn't make sense coming from her, because I don't know what she did. She made a tape and she got famous. Okay, so we're gonna react to the original video.
He can't have a 9 to 5.
What? Why not? You don't want him to have an honest job?
I mean, he could be a hustling entrepreneur.
So you want him to be you want CEO status?
Yes.
Okay, he can't
So
like he can't
like
clock in and clock out.
No.
Damn,
I
B
think
Simone.
entrepreneurs should date entrepreneurs.
Okay, but still, there's people who have really good jobs with vocational skills. If he's a mechanic,
I'm sure, but no, you're not gonna understand my lifestyle. You're not gonna understand why I'm up at 3 a.m.
Damn, you making this hard for me. Okay, all right.
You know, he has to be an entrepreneur.
To be honest, this isn't a surprise, because I think this clip was made around the pandemic era. A lot of podcasts and like content, like relationship focused content, was happening around this time. So the fact that this message is the way she presented it is not really a surprise to me, because it was everywhere. Everybody was a coach, everybody was like an expert on anything. So it was the popular thing to do, where you would see a woman complaining about the fact that the regular man, the 9 to 5 guy, the blue collar guys are not good enough to date that person. And now it makes sense in my head as to why people are hating on it so much. Because I believe if this statement wasn't made, a lot of people wouldn't have a problem with it. They would just look at it as a person just yapping on the internet, talking about stuff that they don't know because they don't experience it, right? But because she said this, and a few years later, having to now experience the exact same thing, the exact same perspective that she has of the men that she called broke, is funny. Now I understand why they're doing these things. If anything, I believe there's a lesson in this, in that money doesn't necessarily always buy you happiness. It can give you freedom, just like it did with Simone. It gives you so much freedom that you have time to go on a podcast and then talk about money in a way that a regular person would never be able to experience. But that's exactly why. It gives you that freedom. But it also doesn't buy happiness. If we're assuming that when she was crying on the podcast and it was actually real, you can see that isn't happy. And I don't think she's actually in a relationship publicly. There's no public knowledge that she's actually in a relationship. So we're assuming that she's actually by herself. That's why she's able to do these things. And if you look back in her past, all of her criteria for a guy had to do with finances and him being an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is such an overused term, to be honest with you. Like, I look at people who are actually in those positions and the amount of stress that they're under. Yes, they get a lot of money, but there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress, a lot of garbage that you have to deal with, and it doesn't always go your way. Just like in her situation, like the amount of money that she was probably making was like consistent for like a little bit, and then it starts to like taper off and just like crash into the ocean or like in a building or something like that. Who knows, right? But like, to conclude, I don't think she said anything crazy. That she didn't say anything crazy that we haven't heard over the past like couple of years. Multiple people have said things like this in varying degrees. So what she said was crazy for the people who heard it for the first time, but for a person who is online and they hear these types of perspectives for a long time, it's not surprising, and I'm sure a lot of people see it that way. And the people who are reacting to these videos probably see it that way, but it's viral. Is she a bad person? I don't know. I don't know the person. But if you are looking at this and thinking that you need to be living in a way that you can say H&M is a downgrade, bro. Being rich is cool, but being happy is way better, to be honest with you. That's it.